Good morning, everybody. And you'll be getting a link up here in just a second.
It's a Hollywood production.
It is, absolutely. All
We're
right.
going
Good
live.
morning.
We're going live.
Good
3,
morning.
2, 1, action.
You are live. And so am I. I better turn my camera off so I don't disturb everybody. And there we go. Dove and Sharon, this mic is all yours.
Okay.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. I wanted to talk today about the atonement principle. I think it's important to go over that for this mind, because it's very simple. The atonement principle, basically, there's nothing outside of me. And that's what it says. This is actually chapter 18, which is, I feel like that's when the course gets amazingly good, because it starts to give us all of the, Jesus is telling us basically what we need to do to watch the figure in the dream, basically, and see that we are the witness, coming forth, the witness of, like the character that I play. It's not anything that, it's not eternal. So it's the eternal part of this. The unchangeable is what I am, not the character. I'm the unchangeable. So Ken, this is Ken's book. I have his, all his stuff. Like, this is his journey through the text. And what he's saying here is, first he's saying there is nothing outside of you. Now, how many times did we hear this from Dove? That is what you ultimately learn for its realization that the kingdom of God is restored to you. For God created only this, and he did not depart from it, nor leave it separate from himself. The kingdom of heaven is the dwelling place of the Son of God, who left not his Father and dwells not apart from him. The premise of the ego's thought system is that we have left our source with no hope of returning. And we can see, that's every day that we see that people believe that God is somewhere else, that, that they're going to pray and go to church or synagogue or wherever, because then God will know when God is within us. That's, and the sin against God is irrevocable. And with heaven forever gone, our permanent home has become the ego. So here I am as this son of God, dreaming of this character, who seemingly had a special relationship with the world. Because you're either in special, when you're an ego, you're either in special love or special hate. You're always divided. You are never whole. And the course says, without exception, including everyone, but the readiness in this mind had to come. And it has come now, where the course is just alive in this mind now. It's just saying basically nothing ever happened. Over to you.
All right. It's perfect that you chose to take a look at the atonement this morning, because today's lesson, which we usually open up with, is lesson 188, which is actually another way of accepting the atonement. It starts off, and I'll put this up in the chat. I already put it in the room, so let me put it in the chat so you can see it. And it starts off by why wait for heaven? Those who wait for heaven merely closing their eyes. So heaven is really the acceptance of the atonement. The acceptance of the atonement is that we never left heaven, that the separation never happened, that the idea that we have to wait to go to a place that we never left is really what accepting the atonement is, at least for me. He says, why wait for heaven? Those who seek the light are merely covering their eyes. The light is in them now. Enlightenment is a recognition. It's not a change. So that's one of the most famous lines. And, you talk about, well, when am I going to be enlightened? No, you're not going to be enlightened. You are the light of the world. Light is not of this world. Yet you who bear the light are yet you who bear the light, I can't read the next line here. You are alien here as well. The light came with you from your native home and stayed with you because it is your own. It's the only thing you bring with you from him who is your source. So the light of heaven, the reality of oneness is always eternal, changeless. It doesn't change with the fact that you walk into a dark movie theater and watching something that was made as an excuse for not being in heaven and thinking that you are somewhere else other than, which is impossible. You cannot be anywhere other than where God placed you. That is a line right out of the Course. So the idea of sharing on what is the atonement and today's lesson is really one and the same. So thank you for choosing that as this morning's talk. Over to you, Sharon.
Today's lesson is 208, right?
Yeah, but it's the review of one.
Oh, I know. It's 188. The peace
yeah.
of God is shining in me now.
Yeah, it's review of 188. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is something I want to look at. You know, the stillness comes on. Well, in this mind, it came a couple of years ago, that stillness, like the perception changed. And the stillness is really what I am. And if I want to make a better holy ego and make Sharon really, really important, then I'm believing that I'm the character. The whole point in this whole Course in Miracles is that nothing ever happened. And I'm always speaking to myself. In this mind, Sharon is a reflection, and so is Dove, because who I am is the dreamer. You know, so when in this lesson, it says, I will be still and let the earth be still along with me. And in that stillness, we will find the peace of God. It is within my heart, which witnesses to God himself. When Jesus talks about being still, he means silencing the ego's ruckus shrieking. When my mind is no longer filled with noise, I will not hear it in the world. The stillness and quiet in my mind is now reflected in my experience of the world. Both my mind and the earth are still. What happens here has no effect on my inner peace because I have chosen the voice of stillness rather than the voice of noise. I love that. And in that stillness, we will find the peace of God. It is within my heart, which witnesses to God himself. His peace is in my right mind, the home of love, and now happily my home as well. I mean, if you just stop, in this chapter, I need do nothing. What does it really mean? Well, who I am, to not interfere with the undoing and to just allow by stepping out of the way of the character, because the character is all force. It's not power. And the power is within all of us, right? So, heaven is not a place nor a condition, is merely an awareness of perfect oneness and the knowledge that there's nothing else, nothing outside this oneness, and nothing else within. This statement is crowning blow to the ego, which is why it just devises its strategy to keep us away from the thought that heaven's oneness is who we are, an identity that forever remains our own. The ego's problem is obvious once we consider that oneness and separation are mutually exclusive states. If the former is true, as the atonement unequivocally states, an individual identity is impossible and the ego non-existent, thus the ego's terror. Of course, the ego is scared. It's weird because the ego basically, I feel like it's an audio program, right? It is a program. But I sometimes reflect on the past in the sense that I remember, and I think I've spoken about this before. I was on the phone with my daughter-in-law, and my voice sounded like it was a record that was scratching you could hear it, like when when a record scratch, it doesn't work. I could feel the audio is working through me. Like this voice is an audio that, the son of, well, the one being, or let's just say a universal mind is using. We each have different voices, but these voices are not real. There's nothing in heaven that ever says that we speak. It's all silence. So the voice is an audio. And the interesting thing is, when I was with my mother as she was, dying, I heard her say something really funny. But at the time, I had the guidance to know that it was an audio. She was talking about my father, and it was so funny. She said, Morty Baker is a faker. And that, to me, would be something. And right then and there, I have to stop and realize she never had any of these thoughts. There was no mother. These were all happening in my mind. When my father, my mother, it's all my mind. So when I was watching her die, I was just watching my mind watch her, my projection, where she was unwinding from the whole story. And the interesting, we know, as course students, we know time is an illusion. But it really, really is an illusion, because without time, we are in timelessness, and we are outside the dream, right? So, the atonement principles, what's really in my mind, I feel the atonement principle is working on everyone. Does it have to get to a place of awakening? Well, how could it have to do that when, in fact, the person's meaningless? So the awakening that happens through some of us who study books like A Course in Miracles, it happens, but we've always been awake, because who we are is wakefulness. Who we are is the Son of God. There's nothing here but God. There's only one thing going on, and that would be love. Nothing else. And the interesting thing is, when we have a filter, that is just a veil over love. But the idea that we really believe our concepts are going to hurt us is just a program. A program can't hurt the Son of God. A program can't hurt spirit. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Sharon. I'm looking at the words, I will be still and let the earth be still along with me. And that stillness has nothing to do with things that we say or do. It's our thoughts. It's stilling the mind, which is the filter that you're talking about. The veil is the belief in our thoughts, thinking that our thoughts mean something. And he tells you in that famous lesson 189, simply do this: be still. Do not take with you one thought of what you are or what God is. Nothing that you ever thought was true or real or good or right. Nothing you were ever ashamed of. Hold on to nothing you ever learned from anything in this world. So what is it that we learn from anything in this world? It's the thoughts of a belief system, a lie that says that you are a body. Notice that today's review lesson, of course, like the last the 20 review lessons that we're in right now, which is review lesson 6. And he tells you any one of these lessons is the entire course. He tells you that in review 6. So it starts off, I am not a body. Now, I realize that accepting the atonement, which just says this is the only thing that you are responsible for. You're not responsible for learning the metaphysics of this course, as Ken Wapnick likes to say. If you're kind to all, you don't really need the fancy schmancy metaphysics of A Course in Miracles. Many have never heard of the word A Course in Miracles and have recognized our connection, our oneness to our Father and ourself and all of our brothers and sisters as equal and as one, and never heard of the word A Course in Miracles. So you don't need A Course in Miracles to recognize that I am one with all. Even in the Jewish prayer, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad is one. That our Father is one. And when you talk about, our Father or God, you can think of God as a body or something separate or something distant or the space between you and the Father. But that's the story of this world. The story of this world is that there is a difference between you and me. In accepting the responsibility of accepting the atonement, there is no you and me. Now, I have dwelled many times on what does it mean to accept the atonement for myself? And it always gets down to the same idea. It's an identity problem. If I identify with Dove the body, accepting the atonement is really a joke. You can't accept the atonement if you think of yourself as a body. You must be willing to say, I am not a body. I am free. I am still as God created me, as love created me. Love creates like itself. Love created me loving, kindness created me kind. And it has nothing to do with a body or an identity that you can give a name to and have a story about. Of course, everybody has a story, and that is, when I came to that aha a few weeks ago, it was recognizing that as long as I believe in my story, you can be sure that I am believing in my identity as a body, as something that was born, lives, and dies. And as Reverend Wayne Sills, no, I wasn't here to be born, live, and die, come back and born, live, and die, come back and born, live, and die. No, that's just a bad dream. To wake up from the dream is to recognize that I never left the oneness, the equality, the peace of God that passes all understanding. The mind of the individual, the ego mind, cannot possibly comprehend what oneness is, cannot. So you can talk about it all you want. You have to be willing to let go of the identity of being a body that allows you to actually remember the truth of what you are. I am spirit. We are all spirit. Spirit is one. Spirit is the changeless, eternal love of God in spirit form, and certainly not in physical or any kind of identity that would be separate from the mind of God. There's only one mind, the mind of creation. We are co-creators with that love of God. We extend the love, we extend the peace, we extend the light. That's what's real. Anything else is simply talking about it. You got to laugh. You simply got to laugh. And with that, Sharon, I turn the mic back on over to you.
I see that Karen had put here, what you think you are is a belief to be undone. That is so important to remember, that one thing that she just wrote, that sentence. And that is in Workbook 91. If you're just a belief, why hold on? But you see, what I saw in this mind was layers. In the beginning, I got it, and then there was another layer to get. And there's just layers of the unconscious guilt. And it's a layered process. It just takes, it's all happening now. There is no time. There never was time. So the unwinding is happening. This mind used to concern itself with, well, why isn't other people waking up? There are no other people. The other thing that this mind would do a lot of is, is tell a story, thinking that I'm sitting with this other person that's across from me, and we have the same story. It's all clashing dreams. That's what we're doing. We are, if I tell a story right now with Dove, he doesn't know what's in this mind because I am a hologram. Everything in my mind right now is me. And, at one point, this mind was very confused about that. And that is the ego. The ego can't figure this out. The ego doesn't even understand what we're talking about. And yet the ego is the thing that brings us our suffering. But it doesn't have any intelligence, really. It's just a memory bank. I was reading, in Ken Wapnick's, all his books are incredible. The journey through the text, he's basically like, he was a brilliant intellect, right? He would never say that about himself because he was talking about all the brilliant intellects. A lot of beings who have a higher intelligence really think that's great. And that is all part of the hierarchy of illusions. There is nothing here that's not competitive. You cannot win in a world. It is a world that was over the moment we thought it. And I think Lynn said this, that we could have different, levels right now of projection of this character that's speaking, because the character is nothing but a thought. And it's in all our minds. Whoever's listening to me right now, they're listening to this character, Sharon, but Sharon is spirit. And I take the power back and I realize that if I tell Dove a story, it's coming from my mind. Now, what is there to say then? Like, in other words, like sometimes I would come in here and say, well, blah, 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 blah. And I would think he would know. What I'm trying to really put in words is there's nothing to say. It's all silence. And the challenge for this mind was to get into the silence and love it. It's interesting how the ego will step away. Now, I listened, thank you to Gloria the other night. I've been listening to Joel Goldsmith. He has a vibration in his teachings now that seems to be raising me higher. When I'm listening to him, I feel, I always feel the oneness when I'm not talking. But when I'm listening to a teaching like Joel Goldsmith, it's just, and I was not ready for that. The biblical part was like the ego was was right in the forefront saying, you can't get that, that, you have a learning disability, blah, 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 blah. And that's what it does. It will keep us away with judgment, whatever it can do when we're all equal. Whatever we did in the world, that was our part to play. And that's what's going on right now. The part to play is slowly but surely just ending up laughing that it's the most ridiculous thing that I did this to myself, that all of the stuff that I went through was all me. It was on my mind. And, I used to think that you couldn't accept this atonement, but you can. You can accept the atonement because the atonement's working in you. There's no Sharon. The thing that I would ask, am I getting it yet? Oh, am I getting it? The ego will do anything to make us feel like we are not equal, right? Here Dove put in this, we ask for rest today and quietness and unshaken by the world's appearances. See, this is the thing. False evidence appearing real. We're not people. And only the ego believes we're people. That's it. Only the separate self. We ask for peace and stillness in the midst of all the turmoil born of clashing dreams. Now, what I have seen in this mind is when I was attracted to something outside myself and I thought I was failing, because, the book will say, if you want the peace of God, to say that is one thing, but to mean it. Well, the meaning came from higher up, from right mind thinking. The ego needs to just fall away. And it depends on how long the right mind wants to stay. The right mind's always there. But for the ego to finally go dormant, right, it's what I think it does. I don't know, though. But when we finally realize that it's just an insane voice, there's nothing that it has to give us. Oh, but my children. Oh, but my ex-husband. Oh, but my parents. All of that is to keep me out of the present moment. And being in the present moment happens naturally. But I watched the mind, how it doesn't want to be here. right? It's just like, no, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. The truth is that we don't die. Do we know what happens when the body dies? Well, I would think nothing, but do I know? No. And what is one of the things that the ego is most upset about? Not knowing. If when it gets into the realm of stillness, like I am right now, it doesn't, it starts to just, fend for its, just wanted to live. It wants to live. It wants to live. And it's trying to get into anything it can. Well, look, you like that president, or you want that person to run. This is what goes on as the ego. It's like when the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz was melting. That's pretty much what our ego mind is doing. Is the ego evil only? No, it's nothing. But we make it evil by our power of the negative thoughts. If we really just realize that the negative thoughts are just a veil. So if you just embrace them and feel into them and not push against them, it becomes easier for all of us. Yeah, I don't know who Pure and Simple is, but I love that name. When the ego humbles to Almighty Creator. Yeah, and the thing is, he'll be humbling too, because the Creator and the creation are one. So when we see ourselves any way but wholeness, and we stop talking about the personal mind. The personal mind, is running program after program, and it doesn't really matter if you hear it the rest of your experience here. You're not that. And so it's pretty important to this mind that I start saying no more character. But what does that really mean? It means I can still play the character. It means I'm still a mother. It means I'm still a friend, whatever you want to say. However, that's just a play. It's not real. So what is the key for me in this moment? Not to take one thing seriously. I love to laugh. That is my favorite thing to do. Probably because when you're laughing, you're not in that crazy mind, right? So the stories that I have, and there's none today, are all coming into my mind, and I'm responsible for them. Totally 100% responsible. Lynn just put, I will substitute for your ego if you wish, but never for your spirit. A father can safely leave a child with an elder brother who has shown himself responsible, but this involves no confusion about the child's origin. The brother can protect the child's body and his ego, but he does not confuse himself with the father before he does this. It's funny, it's like now I can see where I was annoying, even in this process with my children. Because sometimes the ego would just say, like, you really got to read the course, or whatever it is. And the truth is, I'm seeing my own mind. What the heck? Even my children, they're not separate from me. And what I tell about them is what's coming from my filter. And usually, it's good stuff, right? Because they're my children. The my always wants to be good or bad, but it wants something to hold on to. And protecting the character is not necessary. It's all happening organically. This truly is an organic process. If it were up to Sharon, she would have put this book down in the beginning. There is no way that she would have held on to this book, because the book itself is intimidating to this mind, but not anymore. But it took a while. And, the thing, I guess, that really, obviously there's something in this mind that knew this was the teaching that was going to bring me totally home. And also, I want to explore Joel Goldsmith's teachings, because I feel it's just a different flavor of wholeness and sacredness, because we are the sacred. I mean, yes, it's consciousness, and yes, it's God consciousness. It's not God where we really are still. However, it is the I am presence. It's the only thing that's unwinding here, and it's just an illusion. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Sharon. Yeah, the reason I put up that thing from lesson 109, I rest in God, is that you mentioned it's our clashing dreams. And what is clashing dreams other than our stories? Like my story is certainly my story, and is different from your story or anyone else's story. Those are clashing dreams. I'm thinking of someone who I was talking to, who was been holding on to this dream that her father treated her unfairly, and told her that if she was, a woman, she could only do certain things, and that limited her, and she blamed her entire life on her father. Now, her father was gone 40, 50 years ago, and and she still blames him. Of course, that's the same thing as blaming God. God, look at what you did to me. And so when the course uses the word beware, it only uses it once, and that's the only time you really need to use it, is beware of the temptation to perceive yourself unfairly treated. And if you're in this world as a body, you will always perceive yourself unfairly treated, or you're going to treat others unfairly by seeing them as guilty, sinful, they have done wrong and you have done right. In either way, there are clashing dreams. There's a conflict. There's my story and there's your story. It's just a story. It's just a story, but the story is what actually takes us away from remembering the truth. The story is a story that we made up, and the truth is what God is. God is, and then you cease to speak. Truth is union, oneness, and the mind that is distracted by stories or clashing dreams can never possibly ever hear the union of oneness, of sameness, of equality. I want to thank Glorian for putting up here earlier in the room, spirit, am I in a state of grace forever? So the ego, which is always clamoring to win, to actually assert itself as God, wants to be in a state of grace, but spirit is always in a state of grace. Ego can never be in a state of grace, because as it says, ego, which God did not make, does not need to ever be in a state of grace. And of course, you, who God created, is always in a state of grace. So that state of grace is the same as lesson 50. I am sustained by the love of God. If we just accept lesson 50 as true, we don't have to know what's coming next. As you say, the ego wants to know, well, what happens next? What happens next? The ego is never living in the now. It's always living in either the past or the future. Well, I want to know what's going to happen next. There is no next. It's always now. It's always now. Yeah. Reverend Lynn Johnson says, spirit is far from beyond the need of your protection of mine. Remember this, in this world, you need not have tribulation, because I have overcome the world. That's why you should be of good cheer. Yes. And Lindy says, life is a gift. All the ego needs to say is, thank you, Creator. Wow. Yeah. Over to you, Sharon.
I like that. It's Lindsay, right? Lindsay?
Lindy.
Lindy. Okay. Hi, Lindy. We're just talking about guilt here, and there are times that I would think, well, I'm not guilty. Well, but we always feel that guilt. Just remember, when you're driving in a car and the police officer stops you, you get a little like, oh, what did I do now? That is the guilt. So the guilt is in the mind, right? But it's in the split, and it's in the ego mind. The thing that's happened in this mind is it's no longer interested in the stories, the propaganda of the ego, because it just goes on and on and on. And I can honestly say awareness of dreaming is really our job as God's teachers, and I do know 100% this is a dream. It's my dream. And it was kind of fun story. It wasn't a bad story. It was a story of special hate and special love for me. Right. Special love was like, look how great I am. I'm so nice. I have a great art school. I have this and I have that. And then the special hate is, I hate that one out there. That is really all this mind was doing all day long. So it's just Groundhog Day every single moment, unless you realize that who you really are is none of these things. You're just watching. The watcher, the seer, and when that seer comes out, in which way it does for me, it's all I see is the seer right away. From like, I know now the eyes that I'm looking out on, it just is, it's a different experience. Awareness is coming out, but I was never seeing in these eyes. It was always consciousness seeing, and there are different stages of awakening. But, for me, I only care about one thing, and that is I want the peace of God. How far I go in this world doesn't matter. It's my dream. I'm in my own race with me. There is no one else. But and this is why I love Lynn's groups and your stuff, because everybody shares on equality. That's what I see in there. Guilt tells me that I don't deserve God's grace. Yes, yes, yes. And it doesn't sneak. It can sneak, it goes in by the back door. It will go any way it can. I'm going to say something. A lot of people say, well, what's wrong with the ego? Well, I can say that I had a situation where I had significant fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, and now it's almost gone. So there is healing that's happened for this mind. I don't know about anyone else's. And what was that? It was just thoughts and beliefs that were, or something that the egoic mind became terrified of. And what happens is it contracts the energy, and we feel in the body. I mean, my face used to hurt so much because I had all that tension, and that has fallen away. But again, everyone wakes up differently. Now, Ken says minds are joined, bodies are not. We can't hear this enough, because when we go out, and we're talking to people, we're back in form again. And there you go. We are that puppet. I think of myself now as a Gumby, because I'm losing a lot of weight, just because I'm eating well. The Gumby green guy, that's what I think I look like now. And that's pretty much what we are. We're puppets. Anyway, he goes on, this is why the ego made the world of bodies. Now, Ken Wapnick has said this over and over and over. Why does this help us? Because repetition is the only way the mind can learn. And we feel it as we go deeper. We feel the love of God. The ego takes the mind's thought of separation from God and projects it into form. Now, this got me peace right away when I would say this to myself. Since ideas leave not their source and projection makes perception. I can't tell you how many times when I had a loved one that was suffering that I absolutely heard spirits say ideas don't leave their source. Where would they go? They can't go anywhere. They're projected from me. They're not real. They're thought. What's real is who I am. The I am presence, the omnipresence. That's who I really am. The ego takes the mind's thought of separation from God and projects it into form. Okay, so I already read that part. This gives credence to the belief that the separation was an actual occurrence, an integral part of the ego's plan to confuse us about a self we now experience as housed in a mindless body that conceals the mind's guilt. The ultimate purpose of this deception is to convince us we are not children of God, created in his chainless image and likeness, one in love and innocence, but our ego's imperfect misperceptions of sin forever kept apart from our bodies, apart by bodies. It's funny because, this is wordy, and the course can be wordy, but if you just sit with a couple sentences, you just come into the idea that you really do need to do nothing. For this mind, I needed a book like this for sure. I really did. Yeah, all healing is the release from fear. That's what Karen just put down. And that's true, because fear, there isn't a thought. Even when I say, if I talk about a family member, if I don't see them as the Christ and I keep seeing them as that character, what happens then? I'm back in character form. And as long as I have this ego, I don't want it. I don't want to act from there. I want to come from truth, from wholeness, from oneness. So the busy mind is getting unbusy, right? That's what I see. Deception, it's funny. We have deceived ourselves in a level that, well, I know this for a fact. So many course students, I've been in groups where people would not stop laughing because it is hilarious. Yeah, then we see ourselves as the Christ. Yeah, and we've been the Christ all along, and it's just been a story. And the ego go, but how could that not be true? Well, we know this as course students, only the truth is true. The ego fantasizes guilt all the time. It tells us all about the horrific things that are going to happen to us and how we're going to be hated and how. Now, Ken Wapnick was really clear in his teachings. And as Dove and I both have said, that we believe he was made to be the teacher with Helen. That Helen Schuckman didn't even teach this process, where, most scribes do teach their process, I think. But Ken was that teacher, and he would always just basically say, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And I do see, like, a lot of times there's perception of teachers saying, you want to wake up because you're going to come back. Who's going to come back? Maybe the thoughts will, because that's what we are. Maybe all of these thoughts that haven't gotten worked out will come back into another being. But the character Sharon, this is her, it's around the sun how many years whenever I leave the body, but the body really wasn't anything. The body was just made up concepts. And you who think you hate your body deceive yourself. And he writes, we all hate our bodies or different aspects of them, especially as we grow older. Even when we were children, we believed our bodies were not as attractive as others, nor as strong, athletic, or intelligent. Boys and girls liked other boys and girls, not us. This is also true. I mean, if you look at your life and you see what you went through, every one of these things is the whole Course in Miracles. And what makes me laugh is I think I've read every kind of text or book since I started this path, because I love reading books. But the truth is, I don't really need any books. I enjoy them now. Yeah, love the body, and it becomes your servant. It becomes the thing is the body, that's the problem. You can't really depend on the body because the mind of the body will go and start talking. So you come from a place of truth, of wholeness, of love, of oneness, of forgiveness. Forgiveness is the best gift you can give your mind, but it happens automatically. Just keep reading this stuff because it just happens automatically. None of us really hate anybody. We all love one another. This was a story that needed to, and it's funny because, the ego now says, oh, it's almost over for you, Sharon. You're going to be 69. You better stay here now because, you had some real tough years. All of that is like when you just say boo to yourself. That's what you're doing. You're trying to scare yourself. There's nothing that happens to you when your body just dissolves. Have you ever found anybody come back and say anything about, near-death experiences, but there's nothing that can happen to the Son of God. What can happen to the highest good? Nothing. Just concepts. And do I want to be a concept? No. It's insane to use the body as a scapegoat for guilt, directing its attack and blaming it for what you wished it to do. The body, I think I talked about the fibromyalgia over and over. Oh, it hurt. Because the ego was very powerful in this mind. It's never powerful. It's always forceful. But there was an addiction unconsciously. This really is happening unconsciously. It's happening at, the subatomic level when we start to realize that, why it takes time, why it's a process, because of the undoing. But, we got this teaching that is whole and perfect. And, we can laugh at our egos. it's just this veil of forgetfulness. And all the veil is judgment. If you look, there's always a judgment. My mind will just say something like, it's so hot today. And then it'll go on a conversation. I don't like the heat. I wish it would be cooler. Let's go inside. Come on, Scruffy. That's my dog. This is what the ego does. So the thing is, be a comedian about yourself. If you listen to the ego, start to laugh because it's crazy. It's absolutely insane. Do you realize our stories are ridiculous? I mean, when you really sit down and look at your stories, and I'm speaking for mine, but I would say that if you really look, they're all fiction. This whole thing is fiction. We're not these bodies and nothing happened. And, I think I was afraid of the circle of fear when I remember that standing out in my mind. And, there's fear in every mind. You have to make your way through the fear, but what is fear but energy, stuck energy? Now, I can see that, fear is another part. There is an aversion for fear. I know that in the ego thought system. But if we just walk through it, if we just experience it, the only way out is really the whole process. And to join together with your brothers. Anyway, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Sharon. Yeah, I love the part when you said, we just listen to the story and we're afraid of what's going to happen, and it's like a boo, we're afraid of ghosts and goblins and things that we make up in our mind. And what we make up in our mind is a belief, a lie that is distracting us from the truth of what we are, which is the peace of God. And as he says in chapter 15, can you imagine what it means to have no cares, no worries, no anxieties, but merely to be perfectly calm and quiet all the time? Yet that's what time is for, to learn just that and nothing more. Wow, really? And I have found that I am very, very close to that. The things that used to bother me, worry me. I don't get involved with those things anymore. That doesn't mean that they don't show up on the calendar, but I don't pay them any mind or any time. I kind of look at them as, passing dreams, things that are passing in time. And a lot of people say, well, how does it feel to be alone? And as long as you think that you're a body, you're going to feel that you're alone. And that idea of being lonely or alone, needing another body is really the idea that, I am a body. I need another body in order to communicate with. And none of that is true. None of that is true. I go through long periods of not communicating. And when communication is necessary, it happens. It does happen. And it's not necessary that it happens. It's not necessary. It just happens naturally. I was thinking, I noticed you used that the evil witch melting. You used it a couple of times. You used it last week, I think. I was listening to a rerun of our thing, and the Wicked Witch reminds me of in 1968, Stanley Kubrick made an Academy Award-winning movie called Space Odyssey 2001. So he was talking about the future, but the future involved artificial intelligence. It was a group of astronauts who were going to take this trip into space to another, God knows where, place, and they were put into hibernation for this trip, which would take, so that they didn't age during this trip. And they put this computer, Hal, the computer, in charge of taking care of the life of the astronauts who were in hibernation, kind of like frozen, you might say. And Hal was in charge. I always remember the letters HAL is very funny. The whole movie was kind of very mystical in nature. HAL are the three letters that precede IBM. IBM, the three letters that precede it is HAL. I remember thinking that back then, because I did work for IBM earlier in my early 20s. And so this computer was in charge. It's like artificial intelligence was in charge. Now, the artificial intelligence, its job was to sustain life, but it didn't really want the Earthlings to actually achieve their goal, which is to arrive at this place and receive this information. So it systematically started killing off the astronauts one by one. And I think the star of the movie, I think, believe it or not, I thought it was David, but it's not, recognized this, and he had to disarm Hal by taking his energy away, so that Hal was not doing what its mission was, which was to kill off the Earthling life forms. So we had to disengage, and I'll always remember while he was disengaging Hal was saying, "Oh yeah, it was Dave. It was Dave. Dave, don't do that, Dave. Dave, don't do that, Dave. Don't do that, Dave." Yeah, it was definitely David, right? Dave, don't do that. And that's kind of like the Wicked Witch melting. Dave, don't do that, Dave. You gotta laugh. Over to you, Sharon.
Well, what's funny is that we really do take this dream very serious. Let's just say it like it is. We have taken this serious because of the conditioned mind, and it's just because we're listening to a tyrant. That's just the way it is. And when I bring up the witch, it's because it's a perfect illustration of what happens to our ego. It just melts down, dissolving into laying dormant. It's a voice that has it's absolutely a program that will go back and forth. Okay, so it will go to right mind, wrong mind, and right mind is when we can sit and rest in God. But when we're in the wrong mind, if we're listening to that mind, we're not in peace. In fact, there's so much distraction in this world that to stay in peace is to just be peace. Not to try to get to peace, to be happiness, to be love. To give up that I'm an idea, because the idea that I thought I was just that, an idea, a thought, It's like, Jesus explicitly tells us he is not speaking in symbols. The literal truth is that the body was made to limit love. And so how could we possibly expect to find love there, since love is unlimited? How could we remember our wholeness as Christ when we identify with a corpse? The ego's purpose notwithstanding, when given to the Holy Spirit, the body can express the forgiveness that is love's reflection, as what we made to separate is transformed into a classroom in which we learn to undo the ego's lessons of judgment. And that is how simple this is, right? It's this judgment. You don't know anything. That's the whole point of A Course in Miracles. If we think we know something, we're insane. And so in every moment, feel into it. Feel into it. This is a feeling process. It's not an intellectual process. It's a heart process. So feel into it. Where am I trapping my energy now? Where am I trapping my energy? What is this energy trapping in my leg? Or you don't have to get into that. It falls away on its own. You don't have to try to get into any of your big issues because everything unwinds. And this is what the mind is doing. It's unwinding, right? It's like what Dove just put on. Can you imagine what it means to have no cares, no worries, no anxiety, but merely to be perfectly calm and quiet all the time? Yet that is what time is for. This book was set up, but it didn't say, in some places it says you could be that now because you don't change. The changelessness has always been here. The changelessness is alive for this mind now. It's just so beautiful. It's a beautiful process. And it's one that we were called as a gift from our true self, that all of this was made up. And all of it is meaningless too, but not love. Now, love is the only thing that's true in this world. And everything else is just concepts, right? Love is the energy of the universe. And I think at this point, it is 9:30, so I will say goodbye to all of you. But I will be on today listening to Karen, and I have to walk my dog, but sometimes when I like to listen to Regis, he's a wonderful teacher. Everybody is, and I'll be there tonight. And, what's happened for me is that all the shrieking of the mind is just let up, and I just feel so whole. And with that, I'll say goodbye, and thank you, Dove, for being my sharing partner. Hi, Regis.
Okay, everyone loves Regis, and he's on next. Very happy about that. And there's a few more minutes left to this hour. And I'm going to mention tonight, of course, we have 7:30 Eastern time. We have the deep dive into the manual for teachers. And we have a good group, and please join us for that. And I'm basically looking at that same paragraph from chapter 15, the 2 uses of time. Can you imagine what it means to have no cares, no worries? So no anxiety. So that, as he says, is really what the purpose of time is to learn that what we think is going on, and the key word is think, that's our stinking thinking that keeps us believing a lie about something that's not even true, meaning that we have these stories that distract us from the truth of what we are. The truth is that we are whole, perfect, complete, innocent, now and always. And how can you remember that? You can only remember it in the holy instant of now, And the ego is about everything other than now. It wants you to remember the stories from the past. It wants you to plan for the future. What's next? And of course, none of that really means anything. It's like, hey, it doesn't do anything. It's a straw man pretending to be real. The only thing that's real is my willingness to be here now, and in this holy instant of now, to join and be with the love that created me. I am the love. We are the love. There is one love. There's not two loves. And in that is all that you could possibly ever know, is the love of God, which is the light of God, which is really the truth and the peace of God, which is what we are. It's that simple, really that simple. Thank you so much, Sharon,
Okay, I've got to
for
go,
this
but I'll be
morning.
back. I'm going to listen on the,
Okay, very good. And thank you, everybody here in the room, Lindy, Karen, Delia, Glorian, Regis, all the ships out at sea. Here is the mic. Over to you, either Lynn or Regis. The mic is all yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Doug.